So I feel a little bad this morning because I feel like I've teased the Battle of Jericho for 3 weeks now, and we're getting there today. That's why I picked up on all the music there, including, I know some of you probably noticed these things. We've sung that Scarlet Thread song 3 times in the past 2 months. There's 2 reasons for that. One, I really love that song. Second of all, it talks about the scarlet thread in Jericho, which is we're still kind of dealing with that, and we've been dealing with it for weeks. So I think I can promise you we won't hear it anymore until after Christmas. But today, we actually took a vote on it. It was unanimous. I guess I'm not the only one who loves that song. But we were there. We were there, heard it live before they released it last year this time. So that was kind of cool. Okay. But Jericho and Joshua, yeah. So I had this sermon prepared. I've been working on it for 3 weeks, as you can imagine. And last night, the Pro Presenter did this thing to me again where it simply got rid of all my slides, and I didn't have the heart or the time to put it back together. So the sermon you're going to hear today is not mine. I don't know how to put it. We're just going to read the scriptures, and I'm going to tell you about it as it happens. And I have no idea what I said last night, but it seemed to go over okay. So hopefully the Holy Spirit will tell you something again today. But before we get into the scriptures, I just said, I've been kind of a reset for those of you who've been here for these past 3 weeks. We talked about it. I just want to kind of reset this. So they crossed the river to fight the first fight in the Promised Land. They're going to take on a city that's never fallen, Jericho, which is why the walls of Jericho are so emphasized in the Bible, because in that day they were famous. They were legendary. No one had ever conquered the walls of Jericho. And so they're going to do that fight, and they're kind of, I would imagine, fairly nervous, knowing you're about to fight a battle that no one's ever won before. And it is an opposing place. I'll show you some diagrams a little bit later in the sermon. And so it's an opposing thing to look at. So you can imagine they're a little bit nervous, and they get there, and they're trying to, ramp each other up. Like you see the guys before the football game, hitting each other in pads and hitting each other with their helmets. I'm always thinking, just please don't get a concussion before the game. Can we wait? But, you watch them get all ramped up and stuff. That's what happens in battle. They get all ramped up and they're ready to go. So you can imagine when Joshua came out and said, okay, we're going to prepare ourselves for battle. Yeah, Joshua, come on, let's go. And that's when he pulls out the flint knife. It's not exactly what you think, We're going to circumcise all of you. It's like, I was ready to go fight and die, but I'm not ready to do that. It's like, wow. So that we had that. And now this week, after they've recovered, because some time has passed, he's going to come back and tell them again, okay, we're ready to fight, we're ready to fight. And again, it's not going to be what they expected. So it's kind of like this.
Last week, I told the men to get ready for war, and then showed them the flint knives. Oy vey. Today, I told the men to get ready for war, and then gave them all trumpets. Oh my Lord, is this any way to fight a war?
Fit the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fit the battle of Jericho when the walls came tumbling down.
Okay, that's my big, thank you. I don't have to find clips anymore. I can make them. This is a new world for me. Okay, so here's the thing about it. We have to understand the creative God just loves to create. And you're going to have to get used to that. God doesn't do the things you expect him to do the way you expect him to do it. You just get over it. He loves to create. He loves a surprise. And you know that. I mean, take a look at creation. I mean, look at all the different colors and shapes and sounds and smells. He loves this stuff, Look at some of those really weird fish he made. He just put a color here, and he just loves to create. And so part of what I think he's just doing what he does. He's going to create. He's like, yeah, we could just go in. Look, he can send a bolt of lightning down from heaven and just wipe out Jericho. He could do that. He kind of does that, in other places like Sodom and Gomorrah. But he's not going to do that here. He's going to do something else. And there's part of it, he just likes to be creative, but also part of it is there's symbolism going on here that he was doing for us. Jericho was going to fall no matter how he did it, but the way he does it is to send a message to us, because remember, everything's happening in the Old Testament, parallels to our Christian walk. So we're going to go through that, and we're going to see how all this comes together. Now, the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites, and no one went out and no one came in. So that must have been interesting. Because they're huge walls, and we'll show you in a minute. But they crossed the River Jordan, as I said last week, and that probably scared them. They probably thought they had time. Well, they're here at flood time. They can't get here. They have to go way up there to cross it. We're good. And all of a sudden, the river parts and they come through. Okay, lock the doors, boys. Bolt the door. Katie, bar the doors. Here they come. So they lock them up. But they have to be a little bit comfortable because those walls have never fallen. And there's the Israelites coming up, and everything's barred. But I'm going to come back to this again later. I just want you to notice there's somebody in Jericho we want. From 3 weeks ago, there's a woman named Rahab, and her entire family is supposed to be saved. But now they can't get out. So there's good news and bad news, right? These walls are locked, but now Rahab and her family cannot get out. There's no way out. The walls that used to protect them are now keeping them hostage. And again, we're going to get back to that. So now at this moment, with all the gates lock up, all the guards go up to the parapets, and they're watching all this happen. I guess they know we're coming, Lord. Look at that. Watch what happens. God comes in the middle of this to Joshua and says, see, I've delivered Jericho to you. Okay, Lord, it looks like impossibly in front of me right now. But he says, no, I've delivered it to you. Because to God's mind, it's already done. It's just a question of time. It's just going to happen. He says, I've delivered Jericho to you along with its kings and its fighting men. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to march around the city once with all the armed men. Once. And then do that for 6 days. So every day for 6 days, you're going to get up and you're going to do a lap around Jericho. Every day for 6 days. Now, you're going to have 7 priests carry trumpets with ram's horns in front of the ark. And the ark's going to lead you in this parade. You're going to go around it, and you're going to go home, and you're going to go around it, and you're going to go home for 6 straight days. That's what's going to happen. Why? Why would God make us march for 6 days when he destroyed all of Egypt in one? He could have done anything he wanted to. And again, this is because God is trying to teach us something. And part of what he's trying to teach us, and this is really important because we lost this message somewhere in Christianity during my lifetime. I don't know when it happened. But in the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew word for faith means to stand firm, to be steadfast. It does not mean to sit alone by yourself and imagine things. Somewhere along the line, faith has been turned into psychological certainty. It's this mental game we play where faith is believing in something you can't see and not allowing any doubt in. It's this Jedi mind trick kind of a thing that you do. It's not what it is in the Old Testament. It's not what it is in the New Testament, because God is going to make them show their faith by every day getting up and marching around Jericho for 6 straight days. That's pretty remarkable, right? They're going to march for 6 straight days. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this, but one of the big ones is he's trying to teach them and us that faith has action. You kind of learn a lot about people if they're willing to do this kind of thing. When I was young, a long time ago, and I was in 6th grade, getting ready to go into 7th grade, all the kids in the neighborhood decided we're going to be on the basketball team because, we played in the backyard of this thing and we thought we were good, because you do when you're kids. Now, I'm the tallest of my neighborhood, so naturally they wanted me to go too, except I really hated basketball. I always hated basketball, never got along with it, but everybody, you're tall, you should play basketball. Maybe that's why I hated it. I don't know. So they were recruiting me as well, and the ringleader is a kid named Keith Schaefer. Now, Keith Schaefer had an older brother, and so he said, here's what we have to know, guys. We can all make the team. I promise you that, because I've got info. I have intel. Here's what they do. For the first week, you run laps every day. You come to tryouts and practice, and all you do is run laps. That's all. After the first week, almost everybody quits. Everybody who's left makes the team. All you have to do is run laps for 5 days, and you're on the basketball team. And we all look at each other, okay, we can run. We can do this. Yeah, okay. And no one else knows this? No, it's a secret. No one else. Everybody knew this, by the way. This is not a secret. Keith Schaefer did not discover this. Everybody knew this. So, okay. So we went out for tryouts. Guess what? Not one of us made the team, because not one of us was willing to run laps for 5 days. I certainly didn't want that bad. I was the first out. This is crazy. After the first day, I am not doing this anymore. Running laps in a gymnasium is miserable. It's dry, dusty, and I hated it. No, I'm not doing this. I don't want to play. You quickly found out the people who didn't want it, right? And if you didn't want it, they didn't want you. I wonder if that went on here a little bit, right? How many of you really want this fight? How many of you are actually willing to do what God wants you to do? If he wants you to march around this dirty, dusty place every day for 6 days, are you willing to do it? And here's something else I found remarkable, and I actually went back and reread the scripture just to make sure I'm right on this. Joshua doesn't tell anybody the plan. He doesn't tell them it's going to be 6 days. This is a group of people who just wandered the wilderness for 40 years. We don't know how long this is going to last. And Joshua does not tell them. I found that interesting. He's basically, nope, here's what we're going to do. You're going to do what God commands you to do, and you're just going to obey. So that's how God is. I was talking to somebody this past week, and they're talking about how when kids go off to college, they lose their faith, something like 90%. And this guy's really big in Christian apologetics, which is a great field. And that's where you learn all about your faith so you can argue it and debate it. I used to be interested in it. I'm not anymore, but I cheer on anybody who does it. I just have no time for it. I have other things I got to do. And he was saying that's what's necessary. And I said, well, what you need to do is teach the kids that the methodology is wrong. See, that's where we go wrong. It's not what they teach the kids. It's the methodology they teach the kids. See, here's how it works in America. You're told something, and then you go gather the facts about that something used to be books, then it became Google. I guess now it's ChatGPT, which is really scary. But you gather the facts about it, you learn all about it, and then you make the decision whether you want to do what it's telling you to do or not, right? If the facts tell me I have to eat kale and give up ice cream, I have to decide, am I going to do that? And if I'm not, I just don't do it. I just dismiss it. That's a myth. I don't like that. So that's how it works. Is we got the first part. I'm going to give you names for this. This is illumination. That's the first thing. Or I'm sorry, revelation. That's revelation. Something's revealed to you. And the second part is illumination. You gather up the facts. And then the third part is obedience, right? So first I'm told, I study it, and if I decide it's right, then I do it. See, that's what we teach everybody in school. But that's not the way the Bible teaches us. The Bible says God reveals, you do, and then he explains. Maybe. Sometimes he doesn't even. See, switching those two things changes everything because it puts you in charge instead of God in charge. And as soon as you can decide what's true or not that God has said, you're Eve in the Garden of Eden going, that fruit looks good. Do you see? It's the switch of that changes everything. So here we go. So we're going to be obedient, right? That's what we want to do. We want to be obedient. We want to stay obedient to God. So there we go. We're going to go forward for 7 days. Now the seventh day, God tells them, that day's different. You're going to march around the city 7 times. Oh boy, this is going to go over big, right? Now, the priests will blow the trumpets, and when you hear them sound a long blast of the trumpets, then the whole army is going to give a loud shout. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. And the wall of the city will collapse, and the army will go up everyone straight in. You don't have to worry about the walls. I'm going to take care of that. Here's what you're going to do. So Joshua, son of Nun, calls the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord and have 7 priests carry in front of it. Now, I want you to see they're going to put a guard in front of the ark just so no one takes a shot at it from the parapets. But then they're going to have the ark and the priests, and then they're going to have the entire army behind it. So they're going to follow the ark. Why? Because the ark is what? God's presence. So he ordered the army advance, march around the city with armed guard ahead of the ark. And when Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests were carrying the 7 trumpets before the Lord went forward, blowing their trumpets, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. So they're announcing, here comes God, basically. Here comes the Lord. And then the Lord is in the ark. The armed guard marches ahead of them, who blew the trumpets to make sure they don't get hurt. But the rear guard, that's the entire army, follows behind the ark. All this time, the trumpets are sounding. In other words, what he says is, follow the ark, which is what Indiana Jones did in the first movie. Follow that ark. No matter where it goes, no matter what it takes, follow that ark. So this is what you do. Just continue to follow the ark. But Joshua commands the army, do not give a war cry. Do not give a war cry. They will never give a war cry. In other battles, we see them do it. When Gideon fights, for Gideon and for the Lord. You know, when David fights, for King David and Jehovah. These war cries, whatever they are. Don't give a war cry. Do not. Why? He said, actually, don't say a word. You don't say a word. You're going to simply follow it in silent obedience. Why? Because you're going to be still before the Lord and know that I am God. And when I tell you to shout, you're going to shout. But you're not going to do a war cry. You're just going to shout. Why is that? Why would God tell them, don't do the war cry and send the priest forward? Because this will fall not from the war cry, but from worship. See, calling upon the name of the Lord is a thing that is throughout the Old Testament. That we call upon the name of the Lord. Basically, we just call out his name. That's all they're going to do. They're going to call the name of the Lord. This is communal worship. This is the entire body worshiping, because worship is what? Obedience to what God says and calling out on his name. That's what worship is. Now, I don't know. We don't think about that. I hope you all enjoyed the songs today. I do. But even if you didn't, it's important that we get together and worship, because there is power in worship, which is what God's trying to tell them. There is power in obeying me and worshiping me. There is power that gets lifted up and sent into the spiritual realm you can't see, but we can. We were called as a body of believers to get together as a body of believers. I hope the people listening online are listening to me right now. Get together with a body of believers and worship together. Hebrews tells us, do not neglect the public assembly as some have done. And I'll tell you what, after COVID, a lot have done. Good news is my viewership online went up. Bad news, the people in the pews went down. It should not be so, because when we get together as a communion body and we worship the Lord, power is released in the spiritual world. This is scriptural. And this is what's going on right here. This is going to come down not by an act of war, but by an act of faith. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to show you Hebrews. Hebrews 11 says this, by faith, the walls of Jericho fell. By faith. After the army had marched around them for 7 days. That's not a different thing. That's all the same thing. Because by faith, they marched for 7 days. Because you don't march around a place for 7 days. That's not a military move. That's not a maneuver. That's not something that's going to get you ahead of things. They're doing it because God said so. That's faith. Faith is this in action. They showed their faith by doing exactly what God told them to. And then God reminds us that there is power in group worship. If it was powerful enough to take down the walls of Jericho, it's powerful enough to take down the strongholds that are in Elizabeth Township or Monessen or wherever it is that you're from, Carrick. There's power in communal worship. Okay, the Israelites obey. They do that. They follow the ark. The armed men went ahead of them. The rear guard followed the ark. And while the trumpets kept sounding all the time, they're not saying anything. The priests are rat-tat-tatting on their trumpets. On the second day, they marched around again once and returned to camp. And then they did that all for 6 days. One time around for 6 days. On the seventh day, they got up at daybreak. And they marched around the city 7 times in the same manner, except that on that day, they circled the city 7 times. Every other time was once. But on this day, they went around 7 times. Now, Joshua gives them instruction before they go out. Before we head out, I need you to tell you something. You're going to shout when I tell you to shout. For the Lord has given you the city, and the city and all that's in it is to be devoted to the Lord. That means given to the Lord. We'll get to that in a minute. But Rahab, remember her, Rahab? We talked about her, he said. Her and an entire household will be spared because she hid the spies we sent. But I want you to keep away from the cursed things. These are the things that the pagans used in worship. Oh, they were pretty. These idols, this gold, all this, very, very pretty. Stay away from that. Because if you take that, you will bring destruction upon you and the whole camp. Stay away from it. It looks pretty. These things in the world, they look pretty. Leave them. Just leave them. Don't touch them. Otherwise, it's going to bring you trouble. So, when the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, not a cry, not a war cry, a shout, the wall collapsed. And everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. Now, I don't know if any of you had trouble with that scripture, like I had trouble with the scripture, but, weird things stick in my head. I think, wait a minute. 3 weeks ago, we talked about Rahab's house was built in the wall of Jericho. That wall just fell down. how in the world is she still okay? That's a lot of stone falling down. How does she survive that? Isn't she squashed like a bug? How does that work? How did Rahab get saved if her house was in the wall? Again, these weird things hit my mind. But the good news is I look at these things so you don't have to. So I went and looked, how in the world does that work? Well, they've actually done, not too long ago, they uncovered in an archaeological dig the city they believe is Jericho. And they undug enough of it to kind of reconstruct what it looks like. And what it looks like is actually kind of like this. So when he's talking about the walls of Jericho, you can see why no one took it, right? They built up this ramp here. There's this low retaining wall, and they have a sloped hill here, and then they have a smaller wall up here. This, of course, is where Rahab's house is built, not down here. And so when you look at the Hebrew that's behind the verse there, and you look at what it says, like our translation says it fell flat, but what it actually says is it fell into itself. So it says when he shouted, it fell into itself. In other words, this top wall fell forward, rolling down the hill. Now you can see why he said you go up into the city, right? So when all that's done falling down, they're going to go up. But the things that were connected to it weren't necessarily pulled down with it. The wall came down. So the words meaning built in the wall means it supported the wall. I don't know if anybody's ever built a deck here, but when you build a deck and you attach it to the house, you put this thing called a ledger board against the house, and then you put the deck on that, and that's a secure foundation for your deck, or in this case, their house. So they attach it to the wall, but they did not have the house like inside of the wall, like there was some kind of an ant that burrowed into the wall, right? Makes sense? So the wall fell down. But you can also see why this is a problem for the army, especially when you see that it goes on for a very long time, and you also realize that they've just walked around it for 7 times, and you get a little bit disoriented, which is why Rahab had to put that red rope out. So when it fell down, they'd still see the red rope, and they could find her. They could trace the rope back up to where she was. So that's what happened. That's how she was spared, even though the walls came down, for those of you like me who wonder about that kind of stuff. Okay. And here again, all the way in Joshua 6, we're going to talk about Rahab again and again and again. And I thought, wow, why all the detail on Rahab? We have very little detail on a lot of the stuff that's going on. But boy, we hear all about Rahab. Several times it's repeated in the story. And remember, when the Bible repeats itself, it's because it's important. Okay. They devoted the city to the Lord, destroyed with a sword everything living in it. Men, women, young, old, cattle, sheep, donkey, wiped them out. Joshua said to the 2 men, while all this is happening, you go get her. Bring her and all who all belong her out according to the promise you made with her. And so those 2 young men did, who had done the spying, went in and brought out Rahab and her family. They didn't fight. They were on a rescue mission. This is Saving Private Ryan. This is saving prostitute Rahab, right? They're going in there for the sole purpose of bringing her out. And she is saved. They burned the whole city and everything in it, but they put silver and gold and the articles of bronze and silver into the treasury of the Lord's house. I'm going to stop there for a second. Every bit of plunder that could be taken was taken, and it was given to the Lord's house. This is what God told them. I'm going to give you the city, but all the silver and gold goes to my house. Wow, God took everything? Because in those days, by the way, if you were a soldier, you got rich because you got to steal the plunder. That was part of the deal. You got to take the plunder. That's why Roman soldiers signed up, because they could go and they could make lots of money. They come back rich. But here God's saying, yeah, you can have none of it. The stuff that was used in their worship, you can't touch it all. And the other stuff, you bring to me and you put it into my house. Why? Because this is the first fruits. He will not say that again. Just the first one. The first fruits go to God. We'll talk about that more later. Not today. Okay. So that's why. But then we see again that she hid the men of Joshua had sent a spy. She did that, and because of that, she lives among the Israelites to this day. He makes it clear. She is a valued member of our community. We didn't just save her and said, oh, pat her on the head, have a nice life. She becomes part of our community, which is what she wanted. She didn't just want to be free. She wanted to be with them. She knew Jehovah was something special. So why is this so important? Why is God repeating this? Well, I got news for you. This is good news, because Rahab is proof that Jesus is coming for us. Rahab's us in the story, folks. Rahab is a Gentile, not a Jew. Rahab is sinful. Rahab has actually worshipped a pagan god. Baal. You didn't get to where she was without worshiping Baal. And probably, we don't know, but if I were to guess, I would say she probably got her start in her occupation as a prostitute for Baal in the temple, because that's how a lot of them got started. And then she grew up, and she actually became a bit of an entrepreneur. She also had a bit of a textile business and other things. She was a survivor, but she came up among the ranks. But she came up among the ranks in a sinful city doing sinful things, same as us. She's a Gentile, same as us. She is just as blotted out with sin as you can imagine, just like us. But as I talked about a couple weeks ago, when they save her, she ends up becoming David's great-great-grandmother and an ancestor of Jesus Christ himself. This is what we call being washed clean as snow. Right? So all the sin's gone from her. So her story of redemption, even in the midst of the destruction of where she lives, is our story. It's the same story that we have, and it's something that should give us some real encouragement, because there was no way for Rahab to be saved. I want you to see that. Let's go back a couple weeks ago. She is the head madam of a prostitute house. She was rich as far as that goes. But what a profession, huh? And she was manipulating young women to join her. Wow, that's got to weigh on your conscience. Because some of these women that get involved in that, in a very young age. And she's all part of that. You know how dirty she feels, how unclean she feels? But this is what you do, right? You got to get ahead. You got to survive. Just like we do things in this country. But that's how it's done. Dog-eat-dog world out there. We got to make choices. Compromises get made. You do the best you can. And then she hears about a people, the Israelites, who serve a different God than Baal. That God's different. It doesn't require child prostitutes. That God doesn't require people to give themselves like that. That God doesn't have sexual perversion as part of worship. That God's different. And that God took his people out of slavery. And that God parted the Red Sea so they could get through it, so the people behind them could never get them. So they not only got away, they got away forever. And that God has led them right to the riverbanks of the Jordan. And something in her heart quickened and thought, if I could get to know that God, he could get me out of Jericho. He could get me out of the life I'm in. If he could save the Jews from slavery in Egypt, he could save me from the bondage that I'm in Jericho. But she has no way of getting to that God. So God sends them in. James says this. He said, we see that we're justified by works, not by faith. He's big on that. And then says this, was not Rahab the harlot justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out another way? If you remember that story, they came to her whorehouse, let's be honest, that's where they came, and she hid them. And when the king asked for them, she said, that went that away, and sent them out. And then she smuggled them out. If she's caught, she's dead. She's putting her life and the life of her family in jeopardy for these two men she's never met because of the God that they serve. Because she wants to know that God. Because what she says to them is, I've heard of your God. And when he gives you this city, which he surely will, I want to come out and join you and serve that God. And James is saying, and that is why she got saved. Because having just heard about God, she saved them. It was through works that she said this kind of causes a lot of problem in Christendom when James says stuff like that. Martin Luther was so upset, Charles Spurgeon was so upset with this, he wanted this book removed from the Bible, the book of James. Because it seems to contradict what Paul says in Romans, where we're saved by faith alone. And James is saying, you can't separate those two. Because faith in the Bible, faith in the Old Testament, is an active faith. It's not a sitting around believing faith. It's a get up off your butt and do something faith. And so I want to show you the dichotomy here, though, because yes, it's no doubt, if she had not taken action, if she had seen those Jews come in and said, oh, too bad, so sad, here they are, boys. Or if she just said, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to go out and have a picnic and just let whatever happen, happen, as some people do. If she had not taken the action she took, which was, I'm going to save these people, even though it's going to put my life in jeopardy, James is saying she would have never been saved. That's a true story. But if God had never sent the spies in, she could have never been saved. Faith plus works. See how that works? God moved first, because he moved first in our lives too. And he gives us the opportunity to have our heart quickened to him and do something to solidify the faith, for our sake, not his, and then he brings us out. Rahab put her faith in a God she had never seen. This is clear, by the way. It is said when she tells the spies, she says, I have heard about what your God has done. She heard it. She didn't see it. Here's what's remarkable. For 40 years, the Israelites had seen God's work. They saw the 10 plagues of Egypt. They saw the Red Sea part. They saw every day they walked out and there was manna on the ground for them to eat. They saw water come from rocks. They saw all of these amazing miracles with their own 2 eyes. And yet, when they get to the promised land and they send 12 spies in, 10 of them come back and say, yeah, we can't do that. There's no way God can beat these giants. Pfft, that's impossible. We're like grasshoppers in their sight. They saw God's action. They saw his presence. They saw it fill the temple. They saw the pillar of smoke. They saw the pillar of fire. They saw it for 40 years with their own eyes. And they heard Moses talk about him. And yet they didn't believe. And here's Rahab, raised pagan, in a sinful state, in a sinful world, surrounded by Baal worshipers. She just hears about what God has done. And she says, I want that God. Forget this Baal. I want that God. That's a remarkable thing. And we don't know why. But she believed more in the God she had never seen than she believed in the walls that she had lived behind her entire life and her house was securely attached to. That's pretty solid, right? I believe in this. It holds up my weight. I believe in those walls a little bit. They're kind of flimsy, actually, but I believe in those walls. You believe in these things, right? Imagine you're sitting there behind stone walls that have never been beat, and she goes, oh, this will get beat because of the God I heard about. Do you see why she had that faith? Do you see why God was so impressed with her that he says, we got to get that one out? It doesn't matter the situation, right? But she was behind these walls, and there was no way out. Going back to Hebrews again, by faith, the harlot Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe, but because she believed, she received the spies in peace. Faith plus works, both. You can't separate them. They go together. They're not either or, it's together. You can't do anything to earn your salvation. Admittedly, that's not what we're talking about. But your salvation is part of what you believe and part of what you do. You can't separate them. We're supposed to move in our faith. We're not supposed to sit around and watch our faith. That's what James says. You say some have faith, some have works. Okay, show me your faith without works. How are you going to do that? I'll tell you what. I'm going to show you my faith by what I do. Here's how you'll know what I believe. You can watch what I do. But there was no way for her to be saved. None. No matter what she believed, she couldn't get there from there. Here's what's interesting. Those walls which are built around Jericho, which had provided her safety for her whole life, had now become her prison. When they lock those up, she can't get out. Isn't it amazing how the things that we put our faith into our whole life suddenly become our prison and we can't get out? And it could be our reputation. It could be our job. We could put our faith in our family. Maybe we put our faith in something that we go to make us feel good, some addiction that we don't tell anybody about. Whatever we put our faith in that we have lived with and this kind of built these walls for us, and I can always go back here and I'm okay and I'm safe, become our prison. happened to the Israelites. God sent them down to Egypt to prosper and grow strong, but he never meant for them to stay there. But they got used to being with Pharaoh. They got used to letting Pharaoh take care of them. So when Pharaoh tricks them into starting to serve him, they just go along with it. And before they know, they can't get out. They're stuck in Egypt. And then all of a sudden it gets really uncomfortable. This is what happens with a lot of these things we put our faith in. They start disappointing us. Things changed. I don't feel so good about this anymore. But I'm stuck now. So what did God do? He sent Moses in. He sent the deliverer in. They couldn't get out by themselves. So he sends Moses in. And he brings them out. Rahab had lived her life in this city that was safe, and now that city became a prison. So what does God do? He sends his spies in. See, God's always taking the first move. I don't know why, but he does. My wife grew up in an atheistic society. She was raised in the Soviet Union. You had to be an atheist to be part of the Communist Party. It was part of it. You could not believe in God, right? Religion was the opiate of the masses. Her father was an avowed atheist because he had to be an avowed atheist. She was brought up to believe that God is just a fairy tale, and evolution explained everything. But something in her heart, somewhere in her heart, that I don't even think she could even pinpoint, said there has to be a God. And God saw that spark and said, I have to get her out. Now, I'd love to tell you he sent me in and I told her, but she was actually saved before I met her. But by a complete happen chance of things, just weird thing, conversations she had with the masseuse, and he said, yeah, you got to come to my church. And she went there, and the very first time she went there, this is what I've been waiting for. Boom, up front, got saved. Next thing you know, she's doing street ministry. God wanted to save her. And so he pulled her out. That was her Jericho. What's yours? What's your Jericho? Or are you still there? Are you still hiding behind the walls? If I could just make more money, I'll be fine. If you give me $10,000, I won't bother you again. I just need 10 grand to get out of this problem and I'm set. If I were only married, everything would be fine. Oh man, if I only had grandkids. If I only had kids. If I could only get this promotion at work. If I only fill in the blank. What's your Jericho? What wall are you looking for to provide you security? And God's offering you a way out. Can you trust him? Are you willing to string that red cord out and baby get caught? Are you willing to march around a city 7 times because he told you to? He's creative. He's going to tell you to do something weird, I promise you. It's not going to make sense. But he's offering you a way out. See, there's no way for us to be saved either, which is why he sent Jesus. That's why Rahab is such an important story to us. Because even as the city is being conquered, even as the walls are falling down, God has provided a way for her to get out. But we can only be saved if we're willing to trust him more than the walls that we have built. Are you?